Of course, certain aspects of this description parallel other descriptions of biblical figures. Firstly, Noah being white as snow and red as a blooming rose parallels the Nazarite Israelites being purer than snow, whiter than milk, more ruddy in body than rubies. Lamentations 4 verse 7. It also parallels King Solomon being described as white and ruddy in Song of Solomon 5 verse 10, as well as King Solomon's Shulamite wife having a neck like ivory in Song of Solomon 7 verse 4. As for the ruddiness of these light-complexioned figures, pale-skinned people often have a reddish tint because their skin contains less melanin, thus allowing the color of oxygen-rich blood beneath the surface to show through more prominently. This effect is more noticeable in areas with thinner skin, like the cheeks, lips, and ears, where blood vessels are closer to the surface. In certain cases, factors such as circulation, temperature, and emotions may cause the reddish tint to become more prominent. And in this case, redness is the result of blushing. That said, it is also possible that certain biblical figures are both white and red due to sunburn. Either possibility is viable, as the Hebrew term denoting ruddy skin is Strong's 119, Adam, meaning to blush or simply to turn red. Next, Noah's locks being white as wool parallel Christ's head and hairs being white like wool as white as snow. Revelation 1 verse 14. That said, this parallel is inapplicable when discerning phenotypical continuity, as the description of Noah is one of an earthly figure and that of Christ is one of a glorious theophany. So, on to the next parallel. Noah having beautiful eyes parallels King David, who in 1 Samuel 16 verse 12 was said to have beautiful eyes or bright eyes. The two translations do not conflict, as bright eyes are universally deemed beautiful. In this case, the term admoni is not applied, but the mention of scarlet curls evidently indicates that she had curly red hair. As for the mention of her head being as Carmel, consider that in Song of Solomon 1 verses 5 to 6, she states, I am dark but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not look upon me, because I am dark, because the sun has tanned me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but my own vineyard I have not kept. If her head is as Carmel but her neck is as ivory, her neck was likely covered by her hair or a headdress while working in the vineyard, thus maintaining its original tone while the rest of her head tanned. Additionally, the but in dark but lovely implies that swarthiness was not considered attractive to the Israelites. This also indicates that dark tones were not common among them, as if they were, she would not have to pronounce her darkness. Rather, it would be a given, and she would instead say, I am beautiful. With 1. The Maccabean-Roman alliance was formed in the 2nd century BC, and laid the groundwork for increasing Judean presence in Rome. Thus, he may descend from Maccabean-era migrants who maintained genetic continuity for at least a few centuries. This, however, is less likely than the second explanation, being Judean deportations following the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD. That said, the most likely explanation will be the third, being Judean deportations following the Bar Kokhba revolt from 132 to 136 AD. Of course, sample R1547 dates to the end of the Bar Kokhba revolt, and does not reflect admixture with local Europeans, suggesting that he had recently entered the Italian peninsula. Now, a few weeks ago I asked Andre DNA if he could run this sample through his phenotype predictor, and this is the image it produced. As evident, this man was virtually indistinguishable from the Europeans he dwelled amongst, and would certainly be classified as Caucasian. Factor in that the hair in this image is brown rather than blonde, and he may have looked even more European than this image shows. But ultimately, both R10654, R11558, R11556, and R1547 attest to the viability of racial descriptors in the Dead Sea Scrolls Messianic prophecy. It is absolutely plausible that Christ had red or even blondish red hair, and even without genetic samples we could have discerned this. All throughout the Levant are ancient synagogues and churches, displaying mosaics, paintings, and carvings depicting ancient Israelites, all of which date from 100 to 600 AD, and aforementioned samples.
We're in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We are at the Roman Chapel, and one of the things that we want to point out to our viewers today is that if you could shine the light upon this picture of Yeshua, you see that his ethnic originality is African. Now, these pictures are always in the dark in this particular church because this depicts the true ethnic origin of Yeshua. Yeshua was an African Hebrew Israelite. And here, these pictures depict his true pigmentation. Okay? And as we had mentioned before we came into the church, that Constantine was a sun worshiper. He was a high priest of sun worship. That's why most of all these pictures, you see these sun discs behind
the pictures.
If you look at the pictures and you look at the sun disc represented Zoroastrianism, which was the pagan worship of the sun. And that the Roman Empire was populated by pagans.
Okay.
So how could an Hebrew who was named Yeshua convince some pagans to follow him? He's tampered with. And his message was tampered with. And in order to disconnect his message from the Hebrew scriptures, the Greeks convinced some African Hebrews.
I want to give all the praises and the honor to Yahweh by Hashem, Yahweh Shai by Hashem, Racha HaKodash, and double honors to the elder apostles and the bishops of Great Millstone. Honors as well to you brethren, you other elders and fellow believers and supporters of the truth, right? And shalom to the elect. So now I don't know what I'll title this video. Should it be Hebrew Israelite, because we don't call ourselves black. But since they put stereotypes on us, how about we put it on them? Hebrew Israelite versus white Hebrew Israelite. Why don't we do that? But anyway, I mean, this is the stereotypes they put on of these names, these bywords they put on us, as if to say black Hebrew Israelites because we're white Hebrew Israelites. Remember, they're the real racists, right? And we're talking about left-hand side racism. Okay? So anyway, in the video, if you didn't see, I just did a video yesterday on the ruddy doctrine, so I don't think I'll go into much of that. But I will pull up in 1 Samuel 17:42, the International Standard Version, when it says, when and I got this book here called The Ancient Black Hebrews. I'll touch on a paragraph or two of that. I was reading that. It says, when the Philistines looked and saw David, he had contempt for him because he was only a young man. David had a dark and healthy complexion and was handsome. So this guy went into Lamentations 4, I think, when it said, let me touch on that a little bit. Let me see if I can find that. Where was he at on that? Lamentations 4:7. Her Nazarenes were purer than snow. They were whiter than milk, and they were more ruddy in body and rubies. Now, some translations will say in pearls, sapphire, stones, right? Because you do have dark rubies, right? So we don't want to try to say every time you see ruby, it's got to be black or brown or whatever. Sure, there was different color stones, right? So we're not saying that. But it's ironic. In this verse, it says ruddy. But in the International Standard Version, it doesn't say dark and brown and healthy. So you see that it's not always talking about the actual appearance as far as skin complexion. Right? So we're going to go to the lexicon on this real quick before we move on to the greater part of the lesson. It says pure, right? Bright and clean, snow. They were whiter, which means to be dazzling. The milk. So sometimes when you see black, it's not always black as well, but sometimes it's twofold. But as we know, nobody's white. So, you know, the real black Hebrew Israelites is the white supremacists, because black means void of light and evil, right? So you see here already it says red, right? But You see how it goes? It depends on the context. So let's go to Exodus. This is my favorite one to cut all this. I left quite a few comments on this guy's channel. He responds to everyone except me, right? Or any one of us at Great Millstone. He responds to everybody. You know, I left a comment. I haven't heard anything back. A couple of them, actually. And this is one on my left. It says, Exodus 6:25, and Eleazar Aaron's son took him one of the daughters of Putiel to wife, and she bare him Phinehas, the heads of the fathers of the Levites. So we go to Phinehas. I like bringing this out. I don't think I'll ever forget this scripture, unless it's the Lord allows. 863:72. It says, mouth of brass, son of Eleazar, grandson of Aaron, zealousness for the Lord. So, yeah, they have names and meanings. A lot of times some cases when you'll see making a description, it also has meaning to that description as well. So sometimes it actually is saying he's black, but then it has, or he's zealous or whatever. But anyway, it says mouth of brass, just like Boaz, the name for him is pillars of brass, the two pillars of brass or bronze or something like that, right? So when you go down here, it says Phinehas, 863:10, Phinehas. It says here, look, yep, here we go. I brought this out before. You can never bring this out enough. Egyptian Negro, and in the Oxford Dictionary, it calls him the Nubian Negro. Right? Nubian Negro. That's what Phinehas means. So if he's the Egyptian Negro, wait a minute. Something else I just thought of too. Acts. Now, this is why I'm bringing out Acts, right? Because he did say, if it was normal for them to be black, why would they say black? So, this is what they say. If it's normal for them to say black, why would they cry out black? If it was normal for Jesus to be black, why did it mention complexion? This is exactly why. Now, there were in the church that was in Antioch. You know what? Let me do this real quick. I'm going to take after Elder Apostle Tahar saying, when he said, let me do this. Right? Oh boy, I got to find it again. Okay, let me see. Let's go to Acts 13:1. And I want to pull it up. Okay. Here we go. Acts 13:1. It says, now there were in the church in Antioch certain prophets, teachers, right? And Barnabas. Here we go. Barnabas and Simeon, that was called Niger, right? Or Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene and Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch and Saul. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to go look up this word Niger. That was called Niger. Now, this is the reason why they called Niger, because the unusual distinction of the complexion. This is why Song of Solomon, when he talks about black and comely, beautiful, because the difference between the Hamites' blackness and the Israelites' so-called blackness is different, right? Right? You can look at a picture of Michael Jordan, and you can look at a picture of Manute Bol if he's a heathen, right? You can see the distinctions in their darkness. Right? Just saying. You can look at Akeem Olajuwon, right? If anybody know him from West Africa, great center, played for the Rockets, you know. But then when you look at other Africans, because he grew up playing soccer, that's why he had such good footwork, right? So it says Niger, what it says, surname of the prophet Simon, black, Niger the black. Right? This is what it says.
Strong's G 3526. Niger. Strong's G 3526. Niger. Niger.
So now on with these racist white, let me say WHI, right? When you go into the history of the curses, where do they fit the curses? Well, and he goes on to say the blood comes up through the skin. How the hell is that healthy? Right? That's not even humane. Not that let me say that some of our people look white. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying as far as the Israelites, and then you talking about the Messiah, right? Blood coming up, showing through the skin, right? No wonder they got their ass kicked in the Vietnam, right? The mosquitoes will turn their ass up. This is true, man. I used to go swimming in the ocean, right? I was a pretty good swimmer, had trophies, could really swim. And I used to swim, and it was white guys with me swimming. And we would swim back to shore, and their whole legs was stung up with jellyfish. You can literally see the jellyfish following them, man. Right? And we would be standing there when we get to the shore, and they're constantly getting stung. And I'm sitting there, none of them stung me. Not that it couldn't happen. Not that I couldn't get stung by mosquitoes. But that melanin there is a protective layer. How the children of Israel, right, the Messiah whose son was sent, don't have a protective layer. That sun sends harmful rays, but good rays. Harmful, the reason why the rays aren't harmful, by the way. The reason why it's become harmful is harmful to people who don't have the melanin to protect them from those UV rays. Ain't nothing wrong with the rays. It's just harmful to them. Anyway, I don't know if I'll finish everything in this lesson, but I'm going to try to get through as much as I can just to hit the points, right? So that's what Finney asked me. Let's go to Job 30 and 30. It says, my skin is black upon me. My bones are burned with heat. So again, this is why I said these terminologies are used in Revelation 1, talking about the Messiah's complexion. There's a reason for that, because it was a unique complexion. Remember, the children of Israel is as the sand of the sea, very light to very dark, some even reddish, right, to very dark, right? Let me say brownish, light brownish, right? And if it's cold, they might get a little red tint on them, you know? But there's a difference. There's a difference in nationalities. We're just telling you who Esau is, right? And who he stems from. Now it says, my skin is black upon me. Now their terminologies, you know what they'll say? Well, the skin got burnt with blistering. Look, man, let's be honest. The only way something like that'll happen, if you're so-called white, you'd be dead. You know what I'm saying? There is no way. Your skin is a protective, it's like the largest organ that protects your immune system, protects your vessels and your muscles and everything else, right? For them to turn black, I've never seen nobody white turn black. I'm just saying, I've never seen that. And as far as the DNA, I went and looked a little bit of that up. Let's see what it says. Limitations in technology, potential inaccuracies are reference to database used to concern about privacy, so forth and so on, right? I wouldn't look, the people who own DNA, diarobic nucleic acid, the people who own that, you know, can make the determination of what. This man said he put it in his database and this is what he came up. First of all, we have a thing called iconoclasm, where you stole, you robbed, and you set things up to be you. Who's to say that you didn't set up the markers for that DNA, right? And then once let's say it was truthfully known for us, of course this is what you do. And that brings me to my next point, the Bible Destruction Group. And this is why he brought out the Brenton Septuagint, which is in I actually looked that up, 1804. You had a couple of them, believe it or not. You had ins and outs of them doing that, and there was nothing new. Antiochus and them, right? So you had Bible destruction groups, and especially during the time of the 1800s. That's when all these weird doctrines, Jehovah's Witnesses, and out of the Roman Catholic Church, all these doctrines popped up. But you had hell of racism at that time. And they wasn't going to put the truth in the Bible, right? They wasn't going to say the Messiah's hair is Negroid. You know what I'm saying? But you got to go look that up because we couldn't read. But now we can. That Britain Septuagint came about in 1844, right? The Slave Bible was published, that was part of it, in 1807. 1807. That's when they took everything out and gave us what they wanted to give us. Now, I'm going to read a little bit of this book, if I may. If I can read some, if I can see with my glasses. It goes into the original Jews. Let me see here. I'll try to read some of this quick. This talking about the Midianites. It says Shem's most famous descendants was his great-great-great-grandson Abraham. We are told in the Bible that Abraham had children with 3 women: Hagar, the Egyptian, Sarah, Keturah, which is true. We are told of the children with the last woman, right? Let me get to the point because there's a lot in here. Midian and Cushan are clearly the same place in the parallel context of this passage. The Midianite wife. Oh, by the way, this is by Brent Muller, right? It looks like an old white man, right? Don't let a Jake tell you. You got to let the white man tell you, right? Midian and Cushan are clearly the same place in parallel context of the passage. The Midianite wife of Moses is also referred to as a Cushite in Numbers 12. Miriam, the one that got, at that time, Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron. Why would Midian, a nation whose name was known to the Hebrews, be referred to as Cushan, and its people of Cushites? The Cushites had 2 characteristics and served to distinguish them from other African and West Asiatic nations. They were tall, right? Just like the Egyptians, very tall, right? And had unchanged complexions. The use of the name Cushite to refer to them strongly suggests the Midianites also had these characteristics. There is some evidence that the Egyptians also referred to these same Arabians. The Midianites was descended from Shem through Abraham. We can only conclude that Abraham and Shem must have been imagined to be the African appearance. I don't think I'm gonna read all of this, but it's a let me see here. It's a little more. This also goes into Jacob, and it also was it Joseph. When he used a rock as a pillow, it might have been Jacob. Was it Joseph or Jacob? I think Jacob. Okay, but anyway, read a little more. He would explain why his headrest only occurred in cultures. Let me see here. This is going to Jacob. This is the one that talked about he uses the rock as a pillow, I think in the book of Genesis. And why would that happen? I think in the book it was explaining that you had to have that bushy hair to do that, right? It says here, Joseph at the age of 17 was sold to his brothers to Median traders. Like, so this history of that goes, was continuing all the way up to those Barbary slave traders, those so-called Muslims. That was their, that's their MO. Who sold him to the Egyptians. So we talking about Joseph sold to the Egyptians. In that land, he rose to become prime minister. Decades later, a famine arose in the land, and Canaan, which forced his brothers to come to Egypt, right, to buy Joseph, to buy grain. Salakia. Let me read that again. And famine arose in the land of Canaan, which forced his brothers to come to Egypt to buy grain. Joseph's brothers failed to recognize him because he was a relative youth when they last saw each other. His brothers, however, had been adults when they sold him, so it was easier for him to recognize them. Joseph was also seeing them dressed in the cultural context, but his brothers were seeing him dressed as an Egyptian. Joseph understandably spoke, let me see here, to them rudely. When they returned to Canaan, they said to their father Jacob, the man who the Lord, it says, the man who's the Lord of the land spoke roughly to us and took us for spies in the country. Strongly suggests that there's nothing to be, let me go here. It's hard to see, Salakia. It says, strongly suggests, chapter 42 strongly suggests that there was nothing in the appearance of Joseph that distinguished him from the Egyptians. This would include the dress and the physical characteristics. So there's a whole lot more in this book, but what they're saying is when they sold Joseph into, his brothers sold him to Egypt, when the time came, they recognized him because they was adults and he was young, but he didn't recognize them. And what the book is saying is, we all know the Egyptians were so-called black, right? Ptolemy had come to many years later to conquer Egypt, so none of you can say anything about that. Ptolemy Soter, who had many levels of Greek, that's what Greek influence was in Egypt. So at that time, there was so-called blacks. If he was white, if Joseph was a white man, then clearly there would be a big distinction between what he saw and the Egyptians. That's why Exodus 4:22 said the Lord has put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. And the reason why I had to say put a difference between Egyptians and Israel, because if they were white, you wouldn't have to make that statement. It's because it was two different cultures, but the same complexion, right? So anyway, I don't want to take too much on that, but there's, as far as the curses, they don't fit any of their curses, right? So here's Matthew, Revelation 1:15. I just went over this. His feet like unto fine brass, as it burned in a furnace. I wanted to go on a couple of those. These are the Revelation 1, right? Revelation 1, going into the Messiah's feet. And his feet like unto lantern in a burnished chimney. So I went to look up one of these. I probably erased it. This is what you look like. What you see is called a burnished chimney, right? It's not going to be light. See that? Not going to be light. Not going to be light, right? That's very dark, right? Other translations says like unto lantern and frankincense. Fine brass. Let me look up fine brass. Now they're gonna have some of it light, of course, but all the translations said to the frankincense tree. So here we go. Refined fine brass. You see that is dark, dark. You get the point. I mean, I'm not going to go into extensive research for what this guy says. He's in the book of Enoch. What the hell? It was just an added addition. And because of the corruption, you had so much in corruption in that book that all you need is the Bible, which is contained in the Apocrypha, the King James 16:11. Anyway, that's all I have.